Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the hold of a creaky wooden ship bobbing on warm Caribbean waters. Surrounded by an air so thick with salt and sweat you could practically spread it on toast. Somewhere nearby, a rat scurries across a length of rope, and a hammock groans under the weight of a sleeping, possibly snoring, pirate. But don't get too cozy yet. The real story tonight isn't treasure or sea battles, it's the stink. The deep, lingering, nose-wilting stench of life aboard an 18th century pirate ship, where laundry day isn't marked on any calendar and your only detergent is desperation. You're about to experience the not-so-glamorous underside of pirate life, one sweaty sock at a time. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere humid or freezing or anything in between, drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together, it starts with heat. A cruel, sticky heat that wraps around your skin like a wool blanket soaked in seawater. You're sleeping in a hammock, swaying slightly with the rhythm of the ocean, and already your clothes are plotting against you. The shirt clings, the breeches itch, and there's a very real chance you've been sweating into the same fabric for 10 days straight. That's not an exaggeration. Pirate laundry wasn't scheduled. It was more of a desperate improvisation, and it happened only when the discomfort became unbearable or the social pressure turned suffocating. Most pirates owned exactly what they wore: a shirt, some kind of trousers often patched, sometimes silk if they'd robbed a nobleland maybe, a scarf or sash, underwear, if you were lucky, socks, well, that depends on what you stole last week. Pirates weren't running around in clean white linens and dashing red coats, unless they'd recently relieved someone else of their belongings. Historians still argue whether pirates were obsessively practical or just chronically indifferent when it came to clothing. Some accounts describe pirates picking through looted wardrobes with the eye of a Parisian stylist, layering fabrics to impress or intimidate. Others suggest they'd wear the same sweat-soaked outfit until it fused with their skin like a second, slightly moldy layer. What we do know is that pirate ships were floating tinderboxes of human odor. Take the sleeping arrangements, hammocks, packed tightly together in the crew's quarters, often slung beneath decks with little ventilation. The air grew thick with breath, mildew, and unwashed bodies. You'd sleep inches from another man's armpit, your clothes damp with your sweat and probably his. If a man snored too loud, you punched him. If he smelled too strong, you just got used to it. This was more than just discomfort. The Caribbean sun beat down on wooden decks, heating the ship like an oven. Below, with the hatches shut during rough weather or battle, the temperature could rise unbearably. Your breeches got stiff with salt, your shirt stuck to your back, and the hammock beneath you became a sponge for sweat, fleas, and worse. Some pirates tried hanging their hammocks out to dry on deck during the day, hoping a breeze and some sun would reduce the funk. Others gave up and slept on their coats instead. There's one fringe account of a pirate who sewed citrus rinds into his shirt collar to keep away the worst of the smell. Whether for himself or those around him is unclear. And then there's the problem of what we'll politely call personal freshness. Remember, this is the age before deodorant, before soap was common on ships, before people even agreed on whether bathing was healthy. The consensus among many was that water, especially cold water, might actually invite illness. Some captains forbade crew from using drinking water for anything but survival. which meant no rinsing your face, let alone soaking your laundry. So the smell of your clothes wasn't just fabric deep, it clung to your skin, your hair, and the ship itself. Some pirates attempted damage control by airing out garments on deck during calm days, pinning sleeves and shirts to the rigging like haunted flags. If it rained, they'd rush to scrub themselves in the storm, laughing and slipping across the deck like gleeful children with scurvy. And speaking of scurvy, let's not forget what poor diet did to your scent. Pirates ate what they could, hard-tacked biscuits crawling with weevils, salted meat going slightly grey at the edges, and maybe the occasional dried fruit if you were lucky. Combine that with rum, bad hygiene, and the relentless sun, and your body becomes a kind of portable swamp. That smell, it's you now. You've become a mobile ecosystem of bacteria, salt, and misery. Still, there were occasional moments of hygiene heroism. A few pirates, perhaps those with memories of more civilized lives, insisted on washing at least once a week. They'd dunk their shirts in seawater, beat them against a barrel, then lay them on hot planks to dry. Did it help? Marginally. Mostly, it just made your clothes smell like the ocean instead of your own decay. One quirky but semi-reliable trick involves storing your cleanest shirt in an old rum barrel with dried herbs, mint, sage, maybe something that vaguely resembled lavender. It didn't remove the dirt, but it masked the evidence. Sometimes, but here's the kicker, despite all this, you got used to it. Your nose adjusted, your standards dropped. That guy over there who hasn't changed his socks since last port, he's your bunkmate. That hammock that smells like wet dog and regret, it's your bed. Welcome to pirate life, a life not of clean linens and polite company, but of survival, salt, and sleeping in your own stink. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. And you, oddly enough, are still here, rocking gently with the waves, your shirt stuck to your back, your breeches stiff with yesterday's salt, and your nose strangely unconcerned. Because out here, stink is just part of the air you breathe. You wake up to a mosquito bite on your ankle, your mouth dry from too many hours breathing the stagnant ship air, and your shirt still clinging like it's trying to crawl inside you for shade. You swing your legs out of the hammock, nearly knee, a rat as it darts past, and land with a soft thud on the warm, gritty boards. Welcome to another day of pirate life in the 1700s Caribbean, where the air is heavier than your conscience, and the only constant is the unrelenting cocktail of salt, sweat, and your own unwashed breeches. You look down, the trousers you haven't changed in what is it now, 9 days. 10. They're not just damp, they're developing texture. The seams are crusted with dried salt. The back's dark with something you're trying not to think about. Maybe it's fish blood. Maybe it's rum. Maybe it's you. Historians still debate how often pirates changed clothes, or if they even made that mental distinction between dirty and not dirty once out at sea for weeks. Some ship logs suggest clothing was worn until it fell apart, at which point it became bandages, oil rags, or got tossed overboard as a symbolic sacrifice to the gods of mildew. Others hint that certain captains imposed cleanliness rituals, though cleanliness here means beating your shirt against a plank with seawater and praying for sun. Let's talk seawater for a second. Imagine standing on the deck, shirtless, slapping your salt-soaked shirt against the rail. It's not coming clean, it's just getting saltier. Seawater isn't your friend. It never was. It clings to fabric, stiffens it into crusty folds, and leaves behind a briny residue that somehow magnifies body odor. Salt also eats away at thread, so every wash is a small betrayal of your already fragile wardrobe. But what choice do you have? There's no soap, not unless you've recently raided a merchant ship foolish enough to stock something resembling lye or rendered fat. In rare cases, pirates made makeshift soap from ashes and leftover bacon grease. That's right, bacon grease. You might be rubbing last week's breakfast on your armpits just to stop smelling like this week's disaster. And it sort of worked, depending on your definition of worked and how desperate you were to not be gagged by your own shirt. And then there's the heat. You try to stay in the shade, under the rigging or behind stacked barrels, but it doesn't help. The humidity is a wet glove on your face, and your shirt is a second skin of misery. Your breeches ride up in all the worst ways, and your boots, if you even have both, are hot boxes of fungi and regrets. Every movement smears more sweat into the fabric. You try not to sit anywhere for too long, because you'll leave behind a damp print that tells the world too much about you. Some pirates wore loose cotton or linen to fight the heat, but those materials, when soaked, cling like jellyfish and attract every particle of grime the deck has to offer. Wool was used too, yes, wool, because it was sturdy and held up better in fights, but wearing wool in the Caribbean sun is like wrapping yourself in betrayal, the kind of betrayal that ends with you fainting beside a cannon while your friends mock you and maybe, if they're kind, pour some rum on your face. Speaking of rum, let's not ignore its contribution to the laundry situation. You drink to forget the stink. You drink to ignore the salt boils under your arms. But rum doesn't just dull your senses, it leaks through your pores. Your sweat smells like last night's hangover, and your shirt absorbs every drop. Some pirates even used rum in their washing efforts, not because it cleaned anything, but because it smelled marginally better than what they were working with. Others doused their scarves and collars with it to impress portside companions, or at least to smell more like a tavern than a trash heap. Historians still argue whether pirates truly stank worse than other sailors, or if their reputation just outgrew the reality. But when you consider the lack of consistent water, soap, or even fabric rotation, it's safe to say they weren't winning any cleanliness contests. You wander to the side of the ship, eyeing the ocean with the vague notion of diving in. A few of the crew did that yesterday during the doldrums, when the ship barely moved and the heat pressed down like a punishment. But one of them got stung by something with too many legs, and now he's nursing a rash the size of a coin purse. You decide against it. Instead, you stretch your arms and hear the crackle of dried salt breaking in your sleeves. Your shirt could stand up on its own at this point. And the smell, you've gone nose-blind. It's only when a new recruit walks past a kid who still smells like fresh canvas and nervous sweat that you realize how far you've fallen. You smell like the past 3 weeks of bad decisions. You are, in essence, one long laundry problem. Still, not all pirates gave up. Some had systems. A few ships assigned water rations specifically for occasional washing, though this was usually only if they had access to fresh springs or clever collection methods. Rainwater was gold. When the skies opened up, the crew went wild, stripping down to their breeches, dancing, whooping, lathering with whatever they could find: sand, leaves, occasionally ash. It wasn't real soap, but it scrubbed away some of the stink. For 10 glorious minutes, the ship smelled like wet pirates instead of rotting leather and crusty foot traps. Some even claimed that after a proper rain rinse, their shirts felt lighter, their minds clearer. Their chances with port tavern girls marginally improved. The rain gave hope, False hope, maybe, because the sun came back fast, and within hours, your clothes were once again welded to your back like clingy barnacles. But you get used to it. You all do. Clean becomes a memory, a myth told by old sailors about magical lands where shirts are white and breeches don't itch. On this ship, you wear your smell like a badge. You compare stains like war stories. You develop a quiet respect for the guy whose shirt never changes, whose breeches could qualify as armor, and who somehow still laughs every morning like the stink hasn't won. Because out here, it has. And you're now part of it. Salt stiff, sweat soaked, weirdly proud of it. You're leaning against a barrel that smells vaguely of dead fish and yesterday's rum, scratching at the back of your neck where your shirt tag of pirates had tags is, digging into your skin like a persistent tick. It's one of those windless days where the sails hang limp and even the seagulls look tired. You look down again at your outfit, and for the first time in weeks, really consider what you're actually wearing. Because before we go any further in this sweaty descent into pirate hygiene, we have to ask, what even is a pirate outfit, really? It's not the feathered hat and tailored coat Disney sold you. No one was striding around a creaking sloop in pristine black leather or decorative buckles, unless they'd just looted it from some foppish naval officer. The real pirate wardrobe was a Frankenstein of whatever you could steal, patch, or repurpose. Your shirt might have started its life on a French sailor, your breeches taken from a captured merchant, and your boots, if you had both, could have been crafted from mismatched hides, falling apart with every step. And if you didn't have boots, you went barefoot, your soles calloused into leather from days of hot decks and slippery planks. Pirates dressed for survival, not style, though they often landed somewhere in between. Historians still debate whether flamboyant pirate fashion was more intimidation or ego. Some say pirates purposely wore bright silks and absurd patterns to project wealth and defiance. Others argue the clashing fabrics and outlandish combinations were just the natural result of raiding every ship that crossed your path. You end up with outfits that look like a drunk tailor lost a bet, scarves turned into belts, curtains into shirts, flags into makeshift capes. It wasn't just resourceful, it was theatrical. Like pirates invented the concept of goblin mode, centuries ahead of its time. Take your own ensemble right now. The shirt is too big, its sleeves rolled up and secured with bits of rope. The front is stained with something dried and dark, possibly old wine or maybe squid ink. You don't want to know. The breeches are patched 3 different ways: leather on one thigh, linen on the other, and something suspiciously burlap around the rear. Your sash is bright red, which you tied that way not for flair, but because it holds your knife, your pouch of coins, and the one button you keep swearing you'll sew back on. The hat, if you wear one, is probably floppy, sun-damaged, and stolen. Hats were valuable, kept sunstroke away, and added a dash of drama when flung dramatically during a duel, but they also blew overboard more often than you'd like. Some pirates simply tied scarves around their heads, not to look cool, but to keep sweat and lice from dripping into their eyes. Ah, yes, lice, the unsung authors of pirate fashion. You weren't really a pirate until something started moving in your collar, seam, and that's not a joke. Combating lice was a full-time job, and many chose to shave their heads entirely, covering them with caps or bandanas soaked in oil or rum as deterrents. You, for example, might be wearing a hat not to make a statement, but because your scalp currently resembles a hostile jungle. Even so, pirates found ways to flex. Jewelry was common: rings, earrings, bracelets made of bone or silver, even beads woven into their beards. Not because they were vain, though some definitely were, but because valuables worn on the body couldn't be stolen easily. If you died, sure, someone would yank it off your corpse, but until then, it was safer on your ears than in a trunk. One fringe account even claims pirates pierced their ears to improve eyesight, based on a bizarre blend of superstition and half-remembered medicine. No one's sure if that worked, but the earrings remained, partly to hold coins, partly to display kills, and mostly because it looked awesome. And you, standing barefoot in your patchwork breeches with a length of cloth wrapped around your head, probably feel just a little more powerful knowing that the guy next to you thinks your mismatched earrings means something dangerous. But here's the weird part: pirate clothes were durable. They had to be. You climbed rigging in those shirts. You fought sword fights in those breeches. You rowed longboats, dragged nets, swabbed decks, and slept in the same fabric. Every stain told a story, and every hole was stitched with thread you begged, borrowed, or took from someone less lucky. Some pirates learned to sew out of necessity, using fish bones as needles and sinew as thread. Others just tied knots and hoped for the best. There's even one delightful tale of a pirate who mended his breeches with gold thread knot out of wealth. But because that's all he had on hand after raiding a textile merchant, your own sewing jobs probably looked like battle wounds, crisscrossing your sleeves like scars of survival. Over time, your clothes stop being clothes and start becoming armor. Not in the protective sense, God, no. They wouldn't stop a knife, but in the psychological sense. These are your second skin, your pirate credentials. The thing that tells every tavern barkeep and portside laundress that you've been at sea, that you've lived through storms, raids, and at least one drunken brawl involving a bucket of eels, and don't underestimate how important that impression was. In port towns, pirates often cleaned up just enough to not get arrested on sight. That meant flipping your shirt inside out, brushing off the worst of the crumbs, and maybe even dunking your scarf in the harbor to give it a fresh sheen. Some went further, trading in loot for flashy coats and belts, trying to look respectable, enough to blend in, but it rarely worked. The sun-bleached faces, the missing teeth, the patchy scars and lazy swagger always gave you away. You could tell a pirate by the way they walked, like they owned the world and owed it nothing. Or maybe it was just the smell. And here's one last secret about pirate clothing. Nothing was truly yours until you'd bled in it. First fight, first storm, first time you climbed the rigging during a hurricane and tore your sleeve, trying not to fall. Those were your rites of passage. Clean clothes didn't last long. They got christened in sweat, rain, salt, and fear. And when they wore out, you patched them. When they tore again, you patched the patch. And when they finally disintegrated, you cut them into rags and used them to clean your blade, or stuff a leak, or mop up the blood no one wanted to talk about. You scratch your neck again, watching the horizon shift from blue to blazing orange. Somewhere below deck, someone's arguing about who stole whose shirt. You don't blame them. On this ship, clean clothes are as valuable as gold, and twice as rare. You glance down at your breeches, sigh, and wonder whether today's the day. You finally rinse them in seawater. You won't, but it's the thought that counts. It starts with a commotion near the after crewmen arguing over a shirt that might have once been white but now looks like it lost a fight with a squid and a barrel of tar. You don't get involved. Pirate ships were small, but their politics were vast, and laundry, believe it or not, was sacred ground. No one messed with another man's attempt to cleanse the sins from his sleeves. That's why, when laundry day actually happened, which was rare enough to feel ceremonial, lit unfolded like a clumsy ballet of hopeful desperation. There wasn't a set day or a dedicated person. You didn't have a designated laundry bucket or a sign-up sheet. No, laundry day aboard a pirate vessel was improvised chaos, dictated by weather, mood, and the amount of visible fungus on your waistband. You're there now, shirt in hand, barefoot on the sun-bleached deck, squinting at a pile of your own clothing like you're trying to remember if these stains were yours or inherited from a previous owner. Step 1. Seawater. Because unless it had just rained or you were docked near a freshwater spring, that was your only option. So you dunk your shirt over the side of the ship, watch it soak into the blue, then wring it out until your hands ache. It doesn't feel clean, not really, just wetter. But it's a start. Pirates didn't have washboards or detergent. What they had were barrels, fists, feet, and enough frustration to fuel 1,000 stomps. If you're lucky, you might find a spare bucket and fill it halfway with seawater. Maybe throw in a handful of sand or crushed coral, anything with texture to scrape off the worst of the grime. Then comes the stomping. You toss the shirt into the bucket and mash it underfoot like grapes in a bad wine harvest. Some men added rum, others urine, because it contains ammonia and could break down grease. It's not glamorous, but then again, neither is your shirt. Historians still debate the extent to which pirates engaged in full body washing versus just spot cleaning their garments. Some journals describe men splashing themselves with brine before scrubbing their breeches against the rail. Others suggest a preference for dry cleaning methods, beating the filth out of clothes with sticks, rocks, or sheer willpower. You, naturally, try all of the above, and that's when the shirt lets out a smell so potent you recoil like it just whispered something offensive in your ear. It's not just sweat or salt, it's something deeper. The kind of rot that only sets in when fabric and flesh have fused under weeks of tropical humidity and poor life choices. You glance around to see if anyone noticed, but they're all doing the same dance, holding up breeches at arm's length like they're inspecting cursed relics. There's old Black Tom trying to scrape something off his sleeve with the edge of a spoon. Next to him, Red Jack is slapping a pair of socks against a barrel with the sort of grim determination usually reserved for war crimes. Someone else is singing to their boots. Not well, but with feeling. Of course, this is all happening under the merciless sun, which makes drying both easy and unbearable. Once you've given your shirt its seawater stomp and optional urine rinse, you lay it out on the deck or hang it from the rigging. That's when you remember that drying laundry aboard a ship comes with its own risks. First, there's the wind. If a gust hits just right, your freshly stomped shirt will be halfway to Jamaica before you even realize it's gone. Second, there's the birds. They seem to know exactly when you've laid out your only clean garment and wait until the precise moment to defile it with terrifying precision. Third, there's the crew. If your shirt looks cleaner than someone else's, it might not be your shirt for long. Theft was rampant, and in the social economy of pirate fashion, possession was of the law. That's why many pirates stayed close during drying, guarding their laundry like it was treasure, watching the fabric flutter like wounded flags, while muttering prayers to every deity known and a few invented on the spot. But despite all this absurdity, there's something weirdly hopeful about laundry day. It's one of the few times on a pirate ship where things feel almost normal. You're scrubbing, you're cursing, Maybe you're gossiping about who's been eyeing whose rum stash. You laugh when someone falls over trying to wring out their breeches. You trade fabric scraps and argue about the best way to bleach out bloodstains. Spoiler, there isn't one. But that doesn't stop you from trying. And there's camaraderie in this chaos. In a world defined by violence, salt, and rot, laundry becomes an act of quiet rebellion. Way to say, I may be a filthy sea criminal, but at least I'm trying. And sometimes, when the sun is just right and the deck is covered in damp shirts and the breeze is gentle, the ship almost smells decent. Not good, exactly. But less like death. It doesn't last, of course. The clothes dry, stiff and salty. The stains don't really fade, and your armpits are back to full power within the hour. But you wore clean clothes once today. That counts for something. You sit back on a barrel, watching the sails flap lazily and your shirt stiffen in the sun. Somewhere in the rigging, someone is shouting about missing socks. Another crewman is holding up a pair of breeches that look like they've been used to fight a squid. You feel oddly content, because on this ship, laundry isn't just about cleanliness. It's about reclaiming a shred of dignity. It's about making do with what you have, and making sure your shirt doesn't walk away on its own. You sigh, lean back, and let the warm wood press against your spine. Maybe you'll rinse your sash tomorrow. Maybe, but for now, this crusty shirt is your triumph. And that, strangely, feels like enough. The breeze picks up just a little, carrying with it a scent that hovers somewhere between old rope, fish guts, and wet wood, what some call pirate perfume. You've just finished your half-hearted attempt at laundry, but the real problem remains clean water. You stare out over the endless blue of the Caribbean, all that water just out of reach. It surrounds you, taunts you, splashes over the deck with every wave, and yet it's useless. You can drink seawater once if you're feeling bold and want to hallucinate your past decisions in forward. Twice if you'd like to meet death by dehydration disguised as hydration. But washing clothes with it, that's the eternal saltwater laundry debate. A favorite among scholars, sailors, and anyone who's ever rubbed a damp breechcloth against their thigh and regretted everything. Pirates faced a brutal logistical triangle: drink, wash, or cook. Fresh water was scarce and more valuable than gold on long voyages. Ships carried it in barrels, and once it started to run low, the rules got strict. No water for washing clothes, no water for bathing, and certainly no water for dumping over your head in a moment of blissful madness. Every drop had to be accounted for, every sip weighed against future suffering. That's why pirates turned to tricks, hacks, and desperation. Rainwater was king. Some ships rigged canvas sails into catchment systems, channeling fresh rain into barrels for later use. If you were lucky enough to be on board during a thunderstorm, you stripped down, raised your arms, and let the heavens do the work. Clothes got rinsed, bodies got scrubbed, spirits got briefly lifted. It was like God's own version of a pirate spa, complete with thunder soundtrack and the occasional flying chicken from the coop crashing into your ankle. But on dry days, when the skies stayed cruelly clear, you made do. Some pirates collected dew in the morning, using cloths to soak up whatever moisture clung to the rigging, then wringing it out into a basin. Others tried distillation, turning salt water into drinkable water using makeshift stills of glass bottles, heated copper, or their own questionable ingenuity. Historians still argue whether these pirate-built contraptions actually worked or were more fantasy than function. But desperate men get creative, especially when the alternative is sharing a thimble of water with 3 other men and a chicken named Bartholomew. You've seen more than one crewmate fight over a puddle, or sneak into the captain's reserve with a hollowed-out coconut and a look of pure mischief. Water rationing created tension. Fights broke out over who used too much for soup. Rumors spread about someone pouring a mug of water over a stain like a nobleman in a powdered wig. It wasn't just about thirst, it was about control, power, survival. So what do you do when there's no fresh water, and seawater turns your clothes into briny sandpaper? You cheat. You beat your shirt with a rock and pretend it's cleaner. You shake it out in the wind and call it air-washed. You hang it over cannon barrels to steam it during fire drills. More on that in another moment. And most importantly, you lower your standards until you can't even remember what clean feels like. After a while, your nose stops noticing. The salt doesn't sting anymore. You grow a layer of filth so thick it functions as armor. You tell yourself that pirates don't need hygiene. Pirates need grit and rum, and maybe a spare set of breeches that don't crunch when you sit. Still, there were always those mystical beings who somehow stayed fresher than the rest. They had secrets, a hidden stash of water, perhaps an unnatural talent for catching rain in their hats, or just a higher tolerance for licking fabric to see if it was still good. One old tale speaks of a pirate named Ilias the Soft who never stank. He claimed it was because he slept naked every other night to air out his clothes and lined his boots with crushed mint leaves. Whether he was a genius or just lucky with wind direction is unclear, but his legend lives on in whispers and the slightly jealous glares of salt-stiff men. The freshwater problem didn't just affect laundry, it crept into every part of pirate life. Cooking became a puzzle. Stews made from preserved meat and hardtack required soaking, but using precious water for anything other than drinking was a gamble. So some pirates cooked with diluted rum, others with seawater and citrus to cut the salt. The same logic applied to laundry. You might soak your shirt in rum, vinegar, even turtle blood, if it meant dislodging a few layers of filth. Yes, turtle blood. It was sticky, pungent, and very much not recommended. But when options ran low and your shirt could stand on its own, you tried anything. This constant battle with water, or lack thereof, turned laundry into a moral dilemma. Every rinse felt like a betrayal of the communal supply. Every drop diverted from drinking was a whispered scandal. And yet, now and then, you'd do it anyway. You'd sneak a handful of water, soak your scarf, and breathe deeply, just to remember what clean smelled like. And the irony: pirates lived surrounded by water, yet suffered more from thirst and stink than most land-bound folk ever imagined. You could reach over the rail and scoop up a handful of ocean, but it wouldn't help you wash your breeches. It'd just leave you saltier, stiffer, and more aware of how absurd your life had become. But somehow, through this salt-soaked haze of deprivation and sunstroke, you kept going. The shirt still fits. The breeches haven't disintegrated. And that brown stain on the collar, you've decided it gives you character. Maybe one day you'll find yourself ashore, face first in a freshwater stream, sobbing as you scrub your shirt like it owes you money. But not today. Today, you stand at you're squatting on the edge of a weather-worn dock in Tortuga, your shirt still damp from a seawater rinse, and your breeches suspiciously heavier than they should be. Around you, a dozen other pirates are doing the exact same thing, hovering awkwardly near laundresses, trade stalls, and questionable street stew vendors. hoping for the kind of miracle that only dry underwear can bring. That's the thing about port days. They were short, chaotic, and filled with a strange blend of tension and relief. Because, in theory, you could outsource your laundry. In practice, doing so might cost you a boot, a tooth, or your dignity. Port towns, especially the pirate-friendly ones, had women sometimes called washerwomen, other times much less polite things, who made a living laundering the clothes of men who couldn't tell the difference between mildew and mildew's evil cousin, gangrenous mold. These women were hard, efficient, and terrifyingly good at what they did. For a few coins, a bit of rum, or something shiny you found on your last raid, they'd scrub your shirt until the stains screamed and ran away. They used things like lye, soap, river water, herbs, and techniques passed down through generations of women who had washed out worse from worse. The result, clothes that didn't just look cleaner, but felt cleaner, lighter, less cursed, and if you were really lucky, they even came back with the seams intact. But relying on these women wasn't without risks. First, you had to survive the negotiation. They knew pirates were liars, cheapskates, and often tried to pay with buttons or elaborate stories about getting rich on the next voyage. Second, you had to actually part with your clothes, which meant walking back to the ship in nothing but your backup sash and a questionable sense of modesty. Third, there was always the chance your laundry wouldn't come back at all. Maybe it got lost. Maybe someone with better coin bought it out from under you. Maybe it fell into the river and was now dressing a fish. Historians still argue how formalized these transactions were. Some claim pirates set up regular laundry arrangements with trusted port workers, even keeping written lists of who had what. Others argue it was all chaos, shouting, and the occasional brawl over a missing sock. You, in this moment, just want your shirt back, and maybe a kind word from the woman who now knows more about your hygiene habits than your own mother ever did. And let's not forget the darker side of this arrangement. Not every laundress chose her profession. Many were formerly enslaved, indentured, or trapped in debt cycles that left them little choice but to scrub breeches for the very men who helped wreck their lives. Some worked with silent fury, taking out their wrath on stubborn stains. Others used the chance to listen, to gather information, to survive in a world that valued them for labor and little else. The power dynamic was clear. Pirates swaggered in, threw their filth on the table, and expected miracles. But laundresses held all the real power. They could clean, they could ruin, they could disappear your favorite sash without a trace, and they did, often back on the ship. Word spreads quickly when someone brings back clothes that actually smell like lavender, and not just a different kind of decay. A crewmate, whose shirt suddenly has pleats. Pleats, either he robbed a nobleman, or slipped extra coin to someone who took pride in their work. Laundry envy runs hot. You start asking questions. How much did you pay? Was she near the market or the old church? Did she spit in the rinse water? The answers vary. Some pirates boast that they got full service for half a bottle of spiced rum. Others admit they were overcharged, but don't care. When you've worn the same breeches since the last equinox, even the suggestion of softness is worth it. And occasionally, someone tries to cheat the system. Steal someone else's returned laundry. Fake a trade. Claim a lost shirt as their own. The punishment, humiliation, usually public shaming, a sock stuffed in the mouth, or in rare cases, a duel, because on a pirate ship, stealing treasure is expected. Stealing clean laundry, that's personal. It wasn't just about feeling clean. It was about social currency. You return to the ship in a freshly laundered shirt, and suddenly you're a bit taller. Men listen more. You don't stink up the mess. You might even catch the eye of someone portside who appreciates the way your scarf no longer smells like fermented despair. And in those brief moments, you remember what civilization feels like. Not much, but enough to hold on to. There's an old tale of a pirate who fell in love with a laundress, met her in Kingston, paid double for her to scrub his breeches, and stayed. Long enough for her to scrub his conscience too. Gave up piracy, they say. Opened a small shop selling soap made from coconut ash and stolen perfume. Historians doubt the tale's truth, but the point remains. Laundry had emotional weight. You tied memories to the smell of lye, the scratch of fresh linen, the way the wind caught your shirt when it wasn't weighed down with your regrets. For some, it was the closest they came to absolution. You finally get your shirt back. It's cleaner than you've ever seen it. The collar's white. The sleeves are a little shorter, maybe from enthusiastic scrubbing, but you don't care. You bury your face in it, inhale, and feel something shift. You're still a pirate. Still filthy beneath the skin. But for one brief afternoon, you wear the illusion of redemption. And sometimes, that's enough. You're elbow deep in a bucket of gritty water that looks like someone tried to drown a weasel in it, muttering to yourself while attacking the armpits of a shirt that hasn't seen a fresh breeze in a month. There's no soap, not really not. In the way you'd recognize, what you have is a mixture of seawater, crushed coral, and a mystery paste someone claimed was effective against barnacles and body stink. This is pirate laundry, and in the absence of modern convenience, you become creative. Soap, real soap, was a luxury, not just expensive rare. Most ships didn't carry it. If they did, it was a trade item, locked up and counted like coins. The average pirate wasn't rubbing scented bubbles into his breeches. He was smearing whatever he could find, whatever he thought might scrape the funk out of his sleeves. Sand was popular course, abrasive, likely to take off the top layer of fabric and skin in the process. Some used ash mixed with water, creating a grey slurry that left shirts looking like sad flags from a lost battle. Others went full DIY, blending lard with lye if they could find it, and shaping it into chunks that smelled like a goat had an existential crisis. But the strangest thing you've seen, and this is no joke, is the use of urine. Yes, human urine. Pungent, yellow, unsettlingly warm, and rich in ammonia. Ammonia is a natural cleaning agent, and for centuries, people used it to wash everything from tunics to bedsheets. Pirates, lacking options and shame, followed suit. You'd collect it in buckets generously provided by the night crew and let it sit. The longer it fermented, the stronger it got. Then you'd dilute it with seawater, toss in your shirt, and pray the wind change direction. No one liked doing it, but they did it. Because nothing, not even rum-soaked ego, could ignore the odor coming off a shirt that had absorbed weeks of sweat, fish scales, blood, and more bodily fluids than anyone cared to categorize. Historians still argue whether pirates learned this trick from city dwellers or if it was rediscovered at sea out of desperation. Ancient Romans used urine in laundries, after all, and sailors weren't strangers to folk remedies and makeshift science. What's clear is that some pirates swore by it, claimed it cut the stink clean in half, claimed it left their breeches feeling soft, claimed it kept lice away. Whether that's true or just bravado is anyone's guess. But you've seen the bucket. You've smelled the bucket. And after 3 weeks of sun-baked sleeves, you're considering it. Aside from urine and seawater, there were other pirate cleaning agents. Limes, when available, got rubbed into underarms. Not just for scurvy, but to freshen the soul, as one old crewmate put it. Rum, in very small doses, was sometimes used to disinfect small rags, though most pirates would rather drink it than waste it on laundry. Vinegar was a prized wash if you raided a merchant ship carrying cooking supplies, and occasionally, very occasionally, someone would get their hands on real soapard. Brown, full of fat and lye, the kind that stripped away not just dirt, but dignity. The man who had soap held power. He became a laundry lord. He set the rules. He traded a small sliver for favors, secrets, or first pick of the dried breeches. And everyone hated him, just a little. Your hands are raw from scrubbing. The coral mixture is effective, but it cuts like guilt, and your knuckles are flecked with blood. You wring out the shirt and hold it up. Still stained, still questionable in color, but somehow better. It smells less like despair, more like the ocean, which hand this ship is an improvement. You drape it over a rope line and take a moment to breathe. Around you, others are doing the same. A man is using a belt buckle to scrape the inside of his socks. Another is pounding his trousers against a barrel like it insulted his mother. Someone is singing, off-key, about a shirt that ran away and joined a circus. And despite the mess, despite the stink and the discomfort, there's a strange calm to it all. Pirate life is chaos, but laundry, somehow, brings order. Of course, there are limits. Not everything can be saved. Some clothes reach a point where cleaning them becomes a joke. They're too far gone, ripped beyond repair, stiff as bark, darker than shadow. You toss them overboard, watching them sink slowly, like a sad farewell to a bad memory. One man holds a tiny funeral every time he retires a pair of breeches, says a few words, makes the sign of the cross, then turns and asks if anyone has a spare sash. You laugh, but you get it. Clothes aren't just garments, they're companions. They hold the marks of every battle, every storm. Every night you slept with one eye open and one hand on your blade. So when you scrub your shirt, when you beat it against a barrel or soak it in a mix of coral and curses, you're not just cleaning. You're preserving. You're reminding yourself that beneath the pirate, there's still a person who once knew what clean felt like. And maybe, just maybe, will again. Until then, you roll your sleeves back down, flex your sore fingers, and look proudly at the line of semi-clean shirts fluttering in the wind like flags of brief, salty victory. The sky's turning that familiar, bruised purple, and the wind picks up with the subtle menace of a weather system considering bad behavior. You're on deck, crouched beside a barrel half filled with rainwater you managed to collect by hanging. Your hammock upside down and praying to whichever deity specializes in mild showers and fabric redemption. Around you, bits of laundry hang from the rigging like ghost flags, fluttering with the same energy as a drunk sailor trying to explain his alibi. It's a rare kind of triumph. The rain didn't come too hard, didn't soak the powder, stores or bring down the sails. It came just long enough to fill a few buckets and soak a few breeches, and now the ship smells a little less like defeat. Welcome to the wild innovation of pirate rainwater, traps, and laundry hacks. When you're adrift for weeks on end with no land, no soap, and no fresh water, you get creative. Real creative. You've seen men fashion rain gutters out of broken oars and palm fronds. Others rig spare sails into massive funnels, catching every drop of clean water and storing it in old gunpowder barrels that hopefully no longer smell like explosions. Some even shaved their heads, not just for lice prevention, but to reduce sweat absorption into their only remaining shirt. You're part of that inventive class now, squeezing rainwater from your socks and trying not to think about how much of it is foot sweat. Historians still argue whether pirate ingenuity at sea was born of desperation or pure stubbornness. You believe it was both. You've watched crewmates use belt buckles to scrape mildew from inside their collars. You've seen a man iron his shirt with a heated cannonball wrapped in cloth. You once saw a guy use a spyglass to focus sunlight onto a stain, burning it out like some kind of fabric exorcism. When there's no soap and no rules, laundry becomes alchemical parts, science, superstition, and swearing. And yet, some of these tricks worked. Bleaching, for example. Pirates figured out that leaving wet linen in the sun, stretched tight over the deck, not only dried it fast, but helped lift out the worst of the color crimes. They didn't know the science something about UV and natural decomposition, but they knew it worked, at least until the birds came. Oh, the birds. There's no rage quite like the moment a seagull uses your last clean shirt as a latrine. You consider cannon fire, you consider revenge, but mostly you just scream into the wind and start over. Today, your shirt is safe. The breeze is just right, the sun hot but not cruel, and the line you strung between the bowsprit and the ratlins is holding. Some pirates got fancy, weaving their laundry lines with knots so complex they doubled as traps for thieves. Others just tied things up with spare shoelaces and hoped. You look down at your bucket of rainwater, darkened now with flecks of salt and whatever came off your breeches. It smells acceptable, not good, not exactly fresh, but not like defeat. Either you fish out the shirt, give it a few final slaps against the barrel rim, and hang it beside your scarf. There's a ritual to this wash. Wring, slap, hang. It grounds you, reminds you that you're still human, still clinging to some shred of order in the chaos of ship life. Someone nearby is humming a tune, a slow, swaying melody that matches the creak of the hull. Another guy is chasing a sock across the deck like it owes him money, and someone else is arguing with his shirt, blaming it for getting him lice. You don't interfere. Laundry days are personal. Everyone has their process. Some pirates refuse to wash at sea, insisting that only land-based laundry counts. Others wash obsessively, even if all they've got is seawater and hope. There's one guy Bignate who uses fish slime as a pre-soak treatment. Swears it loosens the dirt. You're not convinced, but he smells marginally less offensive than usual, so who knows? Pirate ships were cramped, loud, filthy places, and any attempt at cleanliness bordered on performance art. But the ones who mastered it, who kept even one shirt halfway clean, were treated with a mix of awe and suspicion. You start to understand why. It takes time, discipline, and the willingness to bend over in front of 30 men while squeezing brown water from your undergarments. Not glamorous, not heroic, but quietly, defiantly human. You remember the last time you felt properly clean. It was months ago in a freshwater stream behind a tavern, clothes off, laughter echoing from a distant guitar. The water was cold, shockingly clear, and you scrubbed yourself with handfuls of moss until your skin turned pink. That memory clings to you stronger than most dreams, because out here, surrounded by sun, salt, and silence, you need something to hold on to, something that says, I am not just this shirt, I am not just this stink. I am a person who has known warmth and softness and clean laundry. You lean back against the mast, letting the shade cool your face. Your clothes hang nearby, still dripping. For now, you don't need to move. You've done the work. You've beaten the salt, scraped the mildew, tricked the clouds into giving you enough rain to pretend it's civility. And maybe tomorrow, when the breeze picks up and the smell of the hold creeps back in, you'll forget what this felt like. But not today. Today, you are clean at least, by pirate standards. That's a small kind of victory. It starts with the smell. Not the usual ship funk, that dense blend of sea air, old timber, and 30 humans sweating in unison. This is something else, something more immediate, sharper, like fermented onions served on a bed of hot rope. You recognize it because you're part of it. Your breeches, damp for days, have crossed into hostile territory. The shirt you hung out to dry yesterday, still wet. Mold has started colonizing the seams, raising tiny spots like declarations of microbial war. And with that stench rising between hammocks, so too rises the mood of the crew, and not in a good way. The tension builds fast, silent and sour. Eye contact becomes shorter. Jokes stop landing. A man throws a boot and misses, and no one laughs. You know what's coming. This is the smell of mutiny. Not a mutiny of swords and shouting yet, but one of sweat, stink, and soul-deep frustration. Pirate ships ran on morale as much as they ran on wind. A crew in good spirits could take on the Royal Navy with nothing but guts and grappling hooks. A crew in bad spirits, they'd start biting each other over the last biscuit. And nothing soured spirits like being trapped in a floating sweatbox with men who reeked like forgotten bait. Historians still argue whether poor hygiene ever directly caused mutinies or merely accelerated them. But first-hand accounts are clear. When the ship stank, tempers flared. The correlation might not be causal, but it was certainly nasal. You've seen it before. That one guy who refuses to wash, who says his shirt's lucky, starts getting extra room in the mess line. Whispers follow him. Someone tosses his hammock overboard. He retaliates by urinating in the water bucket. Suddenly, the ship is one argument away from full-blown anarchy. So captains, if they were smart, kept an eye and a nose in hygiene. Some issued mandatory wash orders when things got to ripe. Others organized laundry rotations or appointed a poor soul as the freshness officer, responsible for sniff checking and shouting. One captain famously locked a man in the crow's nest with nothing but soap and a bucket, shouting up at him to come down human. Did it work? Hard to say. But it sent a message. And on your current ship, that message is being delivered. Now, loud and clear. The quartermaster stands near the foremast, nose wrinkled, finger pointing. If I can smell your breeches before I see you, he bellows, you're getting dunked. No one laughs. Not because it's not funny, but because everyone suspects they might be next. You glance down at your own outfit. You tried. Really you did. The shirt has fewer spots than it did yesterday. The breeches are only slightly crunchy. But in the current atmosphere, that's not enough. You shuffle toward your stash, grab a rag, and start scrubbing your armpits with a mix of vinegar and regret. Nearby, a group of crewmates has stripped to the waist and are taking turns with a shared chunk of mystery soap that looks like it was carved from a gravestone. One man is using a deck brush on his back. Another is trying to rinse his socks in the bilge. It's a full-blown hygiene crisis, and everyone's improvising. You remember a time when the smell wasn't this bad. When the ship was new, the crew smaller, the voyages shorter. But as the crew grew, so did the scent. The hammocks are packed tighter now. The air below deck barely moves, and with storms on the horizon, everything's staying damp longer. Wet clothes don't dry. Wet men don't. Smile, tempers, like mildew, spread quickly. The captain tries to lighten the mood by announcing an impromptu laundry contest. Whoever cleans their shirt best gets an extra ration. It helps, briefly. Men start scrubbing with renewed vigor, betting on outcomes, mocking each other's technique. Someone brings out a bottle of something flammable and claims it cleans through fear. But the truth is, no matter how hard you scrub, the smell doesn't fully go away. It just hides for a while, like a rat behind a barrel, waiting for nightfall. At dinner, the mood is tense. The stew tastes like old rope, and no one talks. A single fart nearly ends in a fistfight. You keep your head down, your shirt buttoned, and pray that the wind shifts. It doesn't. Below deck that night, the heat is unbearable. Shirts stick to backs. Feet dangle dangerously close to noses. Someone snores like a dying sea lion. Another mutters in his sleep about soap and vengeance. And you, stuck in your hammock, realize the air tastes like damp wool and failure. You try to focus on the stars outside the hatch. Try to remember what clean air feels like, but it's no use. The ship has become a swamp of sweat and anxiety. And then, in the darkest hours of the night, it happens. A fight breaks out. You hear the thud of boots, the crack of knuckles. Someone accuses someone else of stealing their shirt. The accused retaliates by throwing a piss bucket. The captain storms in, demands order, and gets a boot to the shin for his trouble. The brawl spreads. You duck as a pair of breeches flies overhead like a misguided flag. This is it. Not over gold, not over rum, over laundry, or, more accurately, the soul-deep misery that comes from being unable to escape your own stink. You curl deeper into your hammock and wait for it to pass. By morning, it's quiet again. Bruises are shared like war stories. A few men limp. One has a black eye and no pants, but the air is different. Cleaner, somehow, as if the violence scrubbed something loose. The quartermaster passes around buckets of rainwater and mutters, "Laundry days, mandatory." No one argues. You take your shirt, stained and stretched, and begin again. Because on a pirate ship, the difference between peace and mutiny might just be a bucket, a bar of soap, and the hope that tomorrow smells a little less like today. The sun rises with a sort of smugness, slicing through the damp haze of post-mutiny calm as you lean against the rail, inhaling what passes for fresh air in your current situation. You're technically clean. You've got the vinegar's armpits and freshly seawater-wrung shirt to prove it. But it's a fleeting illusion. The kind of moment where you squint into the morning light and almost believe you don't smell. Like you just lost a fight with a fish barrel. And then someone walks past. Visitor from the last ship you raided. Probably a Navy type gone rogue, clean-shaven, pressed collar. Shirt still creased from whoever ironed it last year. And you're instantly reminded of the divide between fantasy and funk. Because here's the thing. Fashion pirates, the ones you see in the woodcuts and movies, don't exist. At least not like that. No one here is strutting around in a perfectly tailored frock coat or polished boots, unless they've just robbed someone who actually owned those things. Real pirates look like walking scarecrows with attitude. Their clothes are patched, stolen, misfitted, and stained. But in popular lore, somehow, the pirate has become synonymous with theatrical elegance. Buckled shoes, embroidered vests, plumed Hats, none of which makes sense on a ship where a cannon blast or rogue wave could knock you into a net of burning rope and flying cutlery. Hollywood. Pirates smell like cinnamon and speak in tidy monologues. Real pirates smell like old rum and say things like, "Who took my sock? I'll kill thee for it." Historians still argue about the roots of this romanticized image. Some say it's theatrical legacy actors dressing up pirate roles to look striking on stage. Others blame Victorian illustrators who preferred style over stink. But the reality on deck is different. You look around and see cracked heels, pants sewn together with fishing line, hats that look like they've been chewed by sea lions. And yet, weirdly, there's still pride in it. Real pirates took what they could get and wore it like armor. A silk shirt torn from a nobleman became a badge of honor. A red sash meant something, maybe rank, maybe just that you stabbed someone. For it, that's the pirate way. Not about looking good, but about looking like you belong. You once saw a man kill for a coat. Not a gold-trimmed beauty, but a plain brown wool, thin, thick, warm, water-resistant, functional. That was the real currency. Pirates didn't need brocade. They needed fabric that didn't rot in the rain or fall apart under a blade. So they layered, they scrounged, they mixed high with low. A corset over a linen tunic, a pair of nobleman's breeches cut into shorts. One guy wore a bishop's robe for 3 weeks because it covered everything and had secret pockets. The ship called him Father Filth. He didn't mind. Even among pirates, there was hierarchy to attire. Captains and quartermasters, if they'd lived long enough and stolen smart enough, often dressed better not because they had style, but because they had access. A clean shirt meant you had respect. A belt that matched your boots. Practically nobility, but most of the crew were stuck in what could generously be called functional decay. Your own outfit, at the moment, includes a sash made from an old sail, a shirt with sleeves that don't match, and a pair of breeches that smell faintly of fish even after 2 washes. You're not proud, but you are surviving. And still, the image of the dashing pirate persists. The kind who swings from rigging, hair blowing perfectly, boots polished, sword always gleaming. It's a myth. No one polishes anything out here unless it's a blade or a bottle. There's no time, no tools, and certainly no vanity. Your reflection is the ocean, and the ocean does not flatter. You learn quickly that fashion means nothing when your feet are bleeding and your shirt has fused to your back from sunburn and salt. But presentation still matters in its own rugged way. Pirates learned to project power through their outfits, not neatness, but intensity. Bright colors, clashing patterns, stolen military coats. It was chaos couture, intimidation by wardrobe. You might be missing a boot, but if you wore a captain's coat and smiled like you meant it, most wouldn't question you. And then there's the smell. The unmistakable, inescapable reality that no costume, no matter how dramatic, can hide. Perfume, only if you stole it. And even then, it was usually used to mask the smell of gunpowder, or to dab behind your ears, in hopes of impressing someone in a tavern. One guy used a rotting lemon rind as a kind of cologne, insisting it helped with lice. It didn't, but no one told him, because he also carried 6 knives and had trust issues. You might try to mask your stench with spices, rum, or even chard, wood rubbed under the arms, but the truth always seeped through. Laundry didn't just clean your clothes, it cleaned your reputation, your confidence, your chance at not being punched in the mess line. You once watched a new recruit show up. In full fashion, pirate regalia, plumed hat, velvet breeches, a vest with buttons shaped like skulls. He looked magnificent. For 15 minutes. Then a wave hit. The hat flew off. The velvet soaked up half the ocean, and he slipped down the gangway into a barrel of pickled herring. By the end of the day, he was shirtless, barefoot, and crying quietly while scraping barnacles with a bent spoon. That's the pirate aesthetic, less vogue, more whatever survived the last storm. You tug your shirt down, glance at the ragged hem, and sigh. It's not elegant, it's not clean, but it's yours. And on this ship, that's all that matters. No one here is trying to be a fashion icon. You're trying to make it to the next sunrise without smelling so bad that someone ties your breeches to the mast as a warning flag. You adjust your sash, spit into the wind, and grin. Because out here, style isn't about silk, it's about survival. And you, in your mismatched, salt-stiff ensemble, are the best-dressed pirate for at least 3 square miles. The sun rises with a sort of smugness, slicing through the damp haze of post-mutiny, calm as you lean against the rail, inhaling what passes for fresh air in your current situation. You're technically clean. You've got the vinegar armpits and freshly seawater wrung shirt to prove it. But it's a fleeting illusion. The kind of moment where you squint into the morning light and almost believe you don't smell, like you just lost a fight with a fish barrel. And then someone walks past, visitor from the last ship you raided. Probably a Navy type, gone rogue, clean-shaven, pressed collar. Shirt still creased from whoever ironed it last year. And you're instantly reminded of the divide between fantasy and funk. Because here's the thing. Fashion pirates, the ones you see in the woodcuts and movies, don't exist. At least not like that. No one here is strutting around in a perfectly tailored frock coat or polished boots unless they've just robbed someone who actually owned those things. Real pirates look like walking scarecrows with attitude. Their clothes are patched, stolen, misfitted, and stained. But in popular lore, somehow, the pirate has become synonymous with theatrical elegance. Buckled shoes, embroidered vests, plumed hats, none of which makes sense on a ship where a cannon blast or rogue wave could knock you into a net of burning rope and flying cutlery. Hollywood, pirates smell like cinnamon and speak in tidy monologues. Real pirates smell like old rum and say things like, "Who took my sock? I'll kill thee for it." Historians still argue about the roots of this romanticized image. Some say it's theatrical legacy actors, dressing up pirate roles to look striking on stage. Others blame Victorian illustrators who preferred style over stink. But the reality on deck is different. You look around and see cracked heels, pants sewn together with fishing line, hats that look like they've been chewed by sea lions. And yet, weirdly, there's still pride in it. Real pirates took what they could get and wore it like armor. A silk shirt torn from a nobleman became a badge of honor. A red sash meant something, maybe rank, maybe just that you stabbed someone. For it, that's the pirate way. Not about looking good, but about looking like you belong. You once saw a man kill for a coat. Not a gold-trimmed beauty, but a plain, brown wool thing, thick, warm, water-resistant, functional. That was the real currency. Pirates didn't need brocade. They needed fabric that didn't rot in the rain or fall apart under a blade. So they layered, they scrounged, they mixed high with low. A corset over a linen tunic. A pair of nobleman's breeches cut into shorts. One guy wore a bishop's robe for 3 weeks because it covered everything and had secret pockets. The ship called him Father Filth. He didn't mind. Even among pirates, there was hierarchy to attire. Captains and quartermasters, if they'd lived long enough and stolen smart enough. often dressed better not because they had style, but because they had access. A clean shirt meant you had respect, a belt that matched your boots. Practically nobility, but most of the crew was stuck in what could generously be called functional decay. Your own outfit at the moment includes a sash made from an old sail, a shirt with sleeves that don't match, and a pair of breeches that smell faintly of fish even after 2 washes. You're not proud, but you are surviving. And still, the image of the dashing pirate persists. The kind who swings from rigging, hair blowing perfectly, boots polished, sword always gleaming. It's a myth. No one polishes anything out here unless it's a blade or a bottle. There's no time, no tools, and certainly no vanity. Your reflection is the ocean, and the ocean does not flatter. You learn quickly that fashion means nothing when your feet are bleeding and your shirt has fused to your back from sunburn and salt. But presentation still matters in its own rugged way. Pirates learned to project power through their outfits, not neatness, but intensity. Bright colors, clashing patterns, stolen military coats. It was chaos couture, intimidation by wardrobe. You might be missing a boot, but if you wore a captain's coat and smiled like you meant it, most wouldn't question you. And then there's the smell. The unmistakable, inescapable reality that no costume, no matter how dramatic, can hide. Perfume, only if you stole it. And even then, it was usually used to mask the smell of gunpowder or to dab behind your ears in hopes of impressing someone in a tavern. One guy used a rotting lemon rind as a kind of cologne, insisting it helped with lice. It didn't, but no one told him because he also carried 6 knives and had trust issues. You might try to mask your stench with spices, rum, or even chard. Would rubbed under the arms, but the truth always seeped through. Laundry didn't just clean your clothes. It cleaned your reputation, your confidence, your chance at not being punched in the mess line. You once watched a new recruit show up. In full fashion pirate regalia, plumed hat, velvet breeches, a vest with buttons shaped like skulls. He looked magnificent for 15 minutes. Then a wave hit, the hat flew off, the velvet soaked up half the ocean, and he slipped down the gangway into a barrel of pickled herring. By the end of the day, he was shirtless, barefoot, and crying quietly while scraping barnacles with a bent spoon. That's the pirate aesthetic, less vogue, more whatever survived the last storm. You tug your shirt down, glance at the ragged hem, and sigh. It's not elegant, it's not clean, but it's yours. And on this ship, that's all that matters. No one here is trying to be a fashion icon. You're trying to make it to the next sunrise without smelling so bad that someone ties your breeches to the mast as a warning flag. You adjust your sash, spit into the wind, and grin. Because out here, style isn't about silk, it's about survival. And you, in your mismatched, salt-stiff ensemble, are the best-dressed pirate for at least 3 square miles. You're perched near the cannon deck now, your back to a hot barrel that last fired 3 hours ago, still warm enough to melt your spine if you sit too long. The ship rolls gently, rocking you side to side in a rhythm that matches the creaking timbers and the occasional shriek of gulls. You're watching your shirt dry, again, but this time, not on a rope line strung across the rigging or fluttering from the bowsprit. No, today your shirt is draped neatly across a cannon one of the long 9s, the kind that rattles your bones every time it goes off, and you're using the last bit of its residual heat to speed dry your laundry. Improvised pirate laundry hack number 37, cannon smoke, drying. Not recommended by physicians, if you had any, but highly regarded by pirates who needed dry clothes and didn't care about side effects like soot, inhalation, or faint embroidery fires. You reach over and adjust the sleeve so it catches more of the rising warmth. It smells like black powder and survival comforting in a grimy kind of way. This isn't a one-off trick. You've seen crewmates build entire laundry routines around cannon use. After a skirmish or a celebratory gun salute, the gun deck became a multi-purpose facility. Hot food off the still warm barrels, boots warmed against the breeches of captured uniforms, and shirts splayed out like battle flags, absorbing every bit of heat and smoke. It wasn't efficient, and it certainly wasn't hygienic, but it was fast. One man, known only as Bucket John, claimed that cannon-dried breeches were more effective than soap because the smoke sealed in the freshness. Historians still argue whether smoke had any sterilizing properties or whether pirates just liked the smell of burnt rope and ego. What we know for sure is this: cannon smoke did something. It masked the worst of the rot. It gave your shirt a new scent profile, less mildew and despair, more hellfire chic. And when you wore a shirt still warm from battle, people noticed. You felt alive, or at least less dead. Of course, this method had its risks. 1. Poor fool once forgot his socks on a hot barrel, came back to find them scorched into something resembling jerky. Another set his only pair of breeches on fire mid-drying, leading to a chaotic 5 minutes of half-naked flailing and shouted confusion. The cannons themselves didn't care. They'd be reloaded and reek of sulfur regardless. But the crew began to adapt. They tied clothes to the handles, hung breeches from the supports, and learned exactly how long they could leave fabric on hot iron before it turned into a lesson. Some even claimed that the soot helped preserve fabric. It didn't. It stained everything black and left you smelling like a chimney sweep with commitment issues. But it was a smell preferable to body rot and dried fish. There's a certain poetry to it. Drying your shirt on a weapon. It's symbolic. The line between survival and comfort, between war and laundry, blurs in this world. You wash your clothes in blood-warmed water, dry them with firepower, and fold them under the same stars that once watched empires fall. You think about that as you reach to turn your shirt, trying to even out the soot lines. The sleeves are curling slightly at the ends, crisp with smoke and salt. You slap it a few times to shake off the worst of the ash and hold it up for inspection. Not bad, not great, but dry-end on this ship, that's a win. Someone behind you is humming a tune, dragging a pair of breeches across a deck plate. Another guy is swearing as he tries to tie his underwear to a pike without singeing it. You smile. This is normal. This is pirate laundry, culture equal parts, innovation and chaos. There's a whole etiquette to it. You don't dry your socks on the same cannon someone's loading. You don't steal someone else's warm shirt unless you want to lose a finger. And you definitely don't hang anything personal where the gunner's monkey can reach it. Those little beasts have a taste for cotton and mischief. You remember one particular evening, after a messy boarding near Barbados, when the whole crew used the gun deck as a laundromat, breeches over barrels, shirts on ropes slung from cannon to cannon, the air thick with smoke and salt and victory. Someone played a whistle tune. Someone else boiled a fish stew that no one trusted but everyone. 8. You laid back on the powder chest, your shirt drying beside your head, and for one surreal hour, everything felt almost cozy, like a twisted version of home. Not warm hearths and family dinners, but something closer to found kinship, stitched together by sweat and shared danger. There's something to be said for that kind of intimacy. You see a man's true self when he's wringing out his only pair of socks next to you, cursing the sky for raining too much or not enough. You know him better when you've watched him scrub blood out of a scarf with seawater and a prayer. Pirate laundry wasn't just about clothes. It was about resilience, about proving that even in the filth and fire, you still cared enough to clean, even if only once a week. Even if it meant using a cannon as your clothesline, you take your shirt, now fully dried and vaguely bulletproof with soot, and pull it over your head. It smells like the gun deck, sharp and smoky, but it's dry. It fits. It's not clean, but it's been through something, like you. You button the top, adjust the sleeves, and walk back above deck, ready to face another day of wind, salt, and laundry that somehow survives despite everything trying to kill it. Because that's what being a pirate is. Not the gold, not the glory, but the quiet victory of clean clothes, warmed by cannon fire, and worn like armor against a world that never meant for you to make it this far. The ship creaks with satisfaction as it cuts through a stretch of open sea. The kind of calm that makes you squint at the horizon and wonder what disaster is waiting just beyond it. You're leaning on the railing, shirt finally dry, breeze teasing the corners of your scarf, and for once, you don't smell like boiled regret. But that peace doesn't last long. The lookout calls down sails on the edge of sight. Within minutes, orders are shouted, ropes are pulled, and suddenly the calm evaporates into anticipation, a chase, and hopefully a capture. Because if you're lucky and fast, what's waiting out there isn't just plunder, it's fresh clothes. And for pirates, a captured ship wasn't just an economic opportunity, it was a floating wardrobe. Think that, after cannonballs and boarding axes, clothes wouldn't be the first thing on anyone's mind. But you'd be wrong. Once the enemy surrendered, whether merchant or military, the looting started fast and loose. Gold, weapons, food, of course. But then come the real treasures. Crates of fabric, trunks of uniforms, duffel bags of personal effects, shirts that weren't crusted with salt, breeches without suspicious stains, socks glorious, dry, mostly intact socks. You've seen hardened pirates weep over a pair of fresh socks like they were holding their long-lost mother. Historians still debate whether pirates prioritized clothing loot deliberately, or whether it was just a happy side effect of robbing everyone blind. Either way, captured clothes weren't just practical, they were a morale boost. You've seen men light up like it was their birthday when they pulled a new sash from a captain's trunk, even if it still had a bullet hole through it. You remember your first real haul. It wasn't even a big ship, just a slow-moving Spanish cargo brig hauling textiles and spice. The fighting was brief, the resistance minimal, and when it was over, you ran your fingers over bolts of cloth finer than anything you'd touched since childhood. Silk, velvet, linen, the good kind, not the knockoff stuff merchants tried to sell sailors back in port. You grabbed what you could, stuffed it into your kit, and spent the next hour choosing which breeches to replace. It felt ceremonial, holy. Even you weren't just changing clothes. You were shedding old skin. The salt-crusted, threadbare breeches you'd worn for months hit the deck with a satisfying slap. You put on the new pair soft snug, almost perfumed, and you stood taller, straighter. You didn't just feel like a pirate. You felt like a prince of the sea. That feeling spread fast. The crew turned into a market, everyone trading loot, showing off, claiming ownership of this sash or that belt. One guy tried to charge rum for a hat. Another claimed a pair of boots he clearly didn't fit into and spent the rest of the day waddling like a penguin. You weren't immune. You tried on at least 3 shirts before settling on one with lace at the cuffs. Totally impractical. Absolutely gorgeous. You wore it until it ripped in a knife fight 3 days later. Worth every thread. Clothes from captured ships weren't always fancy. More often, they were just clean, whole, functional, merchant sailors. Often had uniforms or standard tissue garments. And those became lifelines for pirates sick of patching holes with twine and lies. Even enemy navy gear had its appeal. Nothing said "I'm not afraid of you" like wearing a British naval coat as a windbreaker while shooting at other British ships. The symbolism was thick, and pirates loved it. You saw a man once drape a French admiral's cape over his hammock and use it as a blanket. Another stitched a flag out of captured sleeves. Every piece told a story. Who you'd beaten, what you'd earned, how far you'd come from whatever landlocked shame you'd once fled. Of course, looted clothes came with their own baggage. Literally, lice for one, fleas for another. The occasional hidden pocket of mold. You learned to shake things out, to sun them properly, to wash them when you could before wearing. But even with those risks, the reward was too good to pass up. Clothes weren't just protection from the elements. They were expression, identity. Out here, where you might die tomorrow, the chance to strut in a coat with real buttons, or a vest that actually closed, was enough to make you feel invincible. And then there was the psychological edge. Imagine this. A ship spots your colors, prepares to flee or fight, and what do they see? A deck full of pirates wearing the uniforms of ships they've already sunk. It's not subtle, it's a message. We killed the last men who wore these. We might kill you too. Fear is a useful weapon, and clothes make excellent trophies. Some pirates went all in, collecting pieces like tokens. Epaulets, officers, sashes, monogrammed handkerchiefs. One particularly bold fellow wore nothing but enemy gear. Boots, Dutch belt, English vest, and claimed to be a walking history of naval failure. You laughed at him until he stabbed a man for wrinkling his lapel. No one mocked his fashion after that. Back on deck, your ship approaches the captured vessel. The chase wasn't long, and the prize isn't grand, but already the crew is eyeing it like it's Christmas morning. You board quickly, weapons drawn, eyes scanning not just for danger, but for fabric. The hold yields dried goods, rope, a few tools, and then jackpot, 2 trunks of clothing. You're the third person there, already elbowing your way to the good stuff. A navy shirt, stiff with starch, a pair of soft leather gloves, a vest with a gold trim that you know will get you punched if you wear it to dinner. You take them anyway. Back on your ship, the sorting begins. Trade, brag, compare. You get into a small argument over a scarf, win it with a well-placed elbow, and wrap it around your head before anyone can claim it. It smells faintly of lavender and fear. You'll take it. That night, as the sun bleeds into the sea, you sit on the deck in your stolen shirt and freshly fitted breeches, watching smoke rise from the galley and feeling, for once, almost civilized. Your clothes are dry, they fit, they smell better than you do, and that's all a pirate can really ask for. Not gold, not infamy, just one more day where your breeches don't scratch, your shirt doesn't flake, and you look halfway decent while shouting obscenities at the moon. The moon is high now, painting the deck in silver streaks, and your hammock swings gently between 2 beams that look more suspiciously cracked than they did this morning. Your shirt, freshly looted and slightly too crisp, lies folded by your boots. You're not wearing it tonight, not because it's too fine, but because you're testing a theory. Letting your body breathe without a layer of sea-soaked cloth might be the only real luxury you can afford right now. But even as the night wind whispers through the gaps in the hull, you can feel it in your bones. Something's rotting. Not metaphorically, not the ship. Something in your immediate fabric vicinity is decomposing, and you're almost certain. It's the undergarments you shoved into your sack 3 days ago and promptly forgot. You turn, nose wrinkled, and pull them out. The horror unfolds instantly. The fabric is stiff, damp, discolored in a way that suggests it has developed its own ecosystem. There's a crust along the waistband, a fuzz near the hem. You hold them by the corner like a cursed scroll. This, you think, is the anatomy of pirate laundry decay. Clothes rot. That's not poetic exaggeration. That's biology. Your shirt, your breeches, your socks wince. They've been soaked in salt water, sweat, rum, fish, slime, blood, and the occasional accidental ink. Spilled, they don't just get dirty. They begin to die. The fabric breaks down, especially if it's natural, cotton, linen, wool. Fibers unravel, seams loosen. Mildew sets in like a silent siege. Historians still argue which fabric lasted longest at sea. Some say coarse linen held up best against the salt and sun, while others claim wool resisted mold better, though it stank like a wet goat every time it dried. Either way, the truth remains. Everything decays, eventually. Out here, it just happens. Faster. You remember the first time you lost a shirt to rot. It started with a smell sharp, sour, vaguely reminiscent of damp leather left in a wine cask. Then came the stickiness, like the shirt refused to be removed from your body without protest. Then the holes, not big tears, but clusters of tiny, fraying wounds, usually under the arms or around the neck places, where sweat pooled and dried again and again until the fabric gave up and surrendered. You wore it anyway, stitched it twice, patched the sleeves with bits of sailcloth. But one day, mid-climb on the rigging, it tore from collar to hem like paper, flapping uselessly as you cursed into the wind. You buried it at sea, ceremonially, tossed it overboard with a coin and a curse. Since then, you've been hyped. Of the signs, tonight's victim, your undergarments have clearly reached that point. They're damp even though it hasn't rained. They smell like despair. And there's a weird green patch that might be mold, or might be something worse. You take them to the deck, hold them up to the moonlight, and decide it's time. Some pirates try to clean everything. Others know when to let go. You mutter a brief farewell and drop them overboard, watching them sink like a shame you're finally ready to release. Of course, not everything makes it to a proper funeral. Sometimes rot wins quietly. Socks disappear into the bilge and emerge weeks later as tattered ghosts. Shirts left folded too long under a damp coat start to liquefy. You once found a pair of gloves in a storage chest, so degraded they dissolved, when touched, leaving only a faint smell of mold and memories. This isn't laziness, it's inevitability. The environment works against you: heat, salt, humidity. There's no ventilation below deck. Hammocks trap moisture, boots turn into swamps, and no matter how often you hang things to dry, the ship always finds a way to redampen them. You sleep in sweat, you wake in condensation. Even your dreams feel soggy. And then there's the bugs, lice, yes, fleas, of course, but also mold mites, tiny creatures that thrive in damp fabric and chew through seams like little seamstress termites. You scratch constantly. At first you blame the salt, then the wool. Eventually, you realize it's the ecosystem living in your breeches. You boil them when you can. Soak them in vinegar. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it just makes them smell like pickled failure. One man swore by smoking his clothes, literally hanging them over a fire until the heat drove out the bugs and the fabrics stiffened into armor. It worked, sort of, until he scorched his only shirt into a brittle crisp. There's no real solution, only delay. You rotate your wardrobe. You patch aggressively. You learn to sniff test your belongings with the precision of a sommelier. This sock has another day in it. That shirt might hold for two. Those breeches. They're a biohazard, but if you tie the sash low enough, no one will notice. Clothing maintenance becomes triage. You spend more time planning laundry than planning battles, and every time you find a new hole or catch a whiff of decay, you feel a little older, a little saltier, a little more like a man being slowly digested by his own wardrobe. Tonight, as you climb back into your hammock, you wrap yourself in your cleanest shirt, the one from the last raid, still mostly intact, still smelling faintly of cedar. You breathe deeply, not perfect, but better. The hammock creaks, your body aches, and somewhere in the dark, someone's swearing softly at a sock that disintegrated in their hands. You smile. Tomorrow, you'll mend your sash. Maybe patch that corner of your sleeve that's starting to curl. But for now, you rest, surrounded by the gentle rot of pirate life, knowing that even if your shirt falls apart mid-sentence, at least you'll have earned every hole. You wake to shouting, not the alarm kind, not the ships and fire kind, but the furious, frothing, someone's going overboard kind. You sit up in your hammock, immediately regretting it as your back reminds you that sleeping in a swaying cloth taco isn't ergonomic. The shouting is growing louder, and it only takes 3 words to understand what's happened. He stole it. That's all. No need to specify what it is. Everyone already knows. Someone's taken another man's clean shirt. On land, that might be a petty offense. On a pirate ship, it's the kind of thing that ends with blood on the deck and someone getting marooned with a broken compass and half a biscuit. Because out here, where you share everything but trust, laundry is sacred. To steal a clean shirt is to steal dignity, effort, and the one moment of peace a man's had in weeks. The fight is brutal and theatrical. The accused is shirtless, which doesn't help his case. The accuser is wearing a breeches sash that used to belong to the cook, so his moral high ground is shaky at best. Still, he swings first, and it all descends into chaos from there. You climb down slowly, watching as 2 men roll across the deck in a blur of fists, fabric, and shouted obscenities. The quartermaster steps in, pulling them apart, demanding to know where the shirt is now. No one knows. Or rather, no one's admitting anything. Someone might have tossed it overboard. Someone else might be wearing it under another shirt. One guy suggests the gunner's monkey took it, which is both absurd and disturbingly possible. Either way, the punishment is clear. Laundry crimes don't go unpunished. On this ship, the rules are unwritten but ironclad. You don't touch another man's hammock. You don't drink from his bottle without asking. And you definitely don't take his only clean shirt. The crew understands this like they understand wind and wavets. Part of the unspoken code that keeps chaos just barely contained. You've seen what happens when it's ignored. Last year, on a different ship, A similar theft led to an actual duel. Pistols at 10 paces, overseen by a man holding a sock as a makeshift flag. The duel ended with a misfire, a broken nose, and 2 fewer shirts in circulation. Nobody won, but the message was clear. Historians still argue whether pirates had formal codes of conduct regarding personal property. Some captains did maintain written articles listing punishable offenses and their consequences. Others operated on reputation, fear, and whatever justice could be delivered with a rope or a knife. But when it came to laundry, even the loosest crews upheld a strict, if unofficial, code. Your shirt was yours. Your breeches were yours. If you spent an afternoon stomping them in a bucket and laying them out like a nervous mother hen, no one had the right to touch them. It wasn't just about hygiene. It was about respect, about effort, about drawing a line in a world where everything else was fluid and stolen. The crew begins to settle again. The fighters are separated, bruised, shirtless, glaring. The missing shirt is still missing. It'll turn up probably on someone quieter, sneakier, or bolder than either of the men who just bled over it. You watch them stalk away in opposite directions, both muttering about revenge, mildew, and how laundry's not worth dying for, even though they both know that's a lie. Because it is. In this context, in this ridiculous, grimy microcosm of human nature and sea salt, a clean shirt is worth dying for, or at least fighting for. You return to your spot near the midship hatch and begin inspecting your own clothes. Shirt, intact, stiff at the sleeves. Breeches, still wearable, though one seam is looking increasingly traitorous. Sash, not stolen. You sigh with relief and fold your garments more tightly, tying them into a bundle you'll sleep on tonight. Theft prevention via pillow. Not the most comfortable solution, but effective. You know some crew who sleep with their shirts knotted to their wrists, others who hide them in barrels or string them into the rigging. One man once stored his socks in the powder keg chest, claiming no one would dare look there. They didn't. But the socks came out smelling like old cannon fire and fear. There's a moment, sitting on the deck as the sun begins to rise, when you understand just how fragile this whole system is. This ship, this floating mess of rope, rust, and personalities, is held together not by rules, but by shared desperation. You all want to live. You all want to survive the storms, the battles, the boredom. And you all want, in your own small way, to feel human. Laundry, for all its mundanity, becomes a ritual of reclaiming that humanity. You wash your shirt not just to remove the stink, but to remind yourself that you still care. You fold it not because it's necessary, but because it gives shape to a day that otherwise drifts by like sea foam. So when someone steals it, they're not just taking fabric, they're taking your effort, your structure, your story. Punishments vary. Some captains humiliate the offender, force them to wear their crime literally, by making them walk the deck in rags or nothing at all. Others assign bilge duty, the lowest of the low, cleaning the sludge and stink at the bottom of the ship. A few, more extreme, maroon thieves, leaving them on some desolate sandbar with a knife, a jug, and their shame. It rarely comes to that, but the threat is always there, floating just beneath the surface, like a shark you pretend isn't following your boat. You glance toward the accused thief, now slumped by the foremast, shirtless, bruised, and muttering. You feel for him a little. Everyone's been tempted. You've stared at drying shirts and thought, would he notice if I wore it just once? But you've never done it, because you know the cost. It's not worth the fights, the bruises, the permanent stain it puts on your name. Reputation is currency, especially on a ship where everyone smells like low tide and rum. The only thing you truly own is your word, and maybe, on a good day, your shirt. The breeze shifts, the ship groans. A gull screams overhead. Somewhere below deck, someone laughs, and it sounds almost real. You roll your bundle tighter, tuck it beneath your arm, and start your watch shift. Shirt or no shirt, clean or crusted, you've made it through another laundry-related crisis. Tomorrow it might be you, chasing someone down the deck with a half-washed sock in your hand and murder in your heart. But not today. Today you've got your breeches, your bundle, and just enough peace to believe, for a few minutes, that this floating madhouse is home. The weather turns. Not suddenly, not in that cinematic flash of lightning sort of way, but slowly, like a pot starting to boil and pretending it's not. It starts with the humidity crawling back up your spine like a damp cat. Then the breeze dies, and you realize the air isn't moving anymore. You're sweating again, but this time it sticks not just to you, but to everything. Your shirt, which yesterday fluttered on the line with pirate pride, now hangs limp and wet against your back, as if it's absorbing the mood. The sails droop, the deck glistens with condensation, and that's when you know the mold is coming. Not just any mold. Caribbean mold. Aggressive, relentless, and somehow personal. You'd think you'd get used to it, but no. Every time it sneaks back in, it feels like an insult. Like the tropics are laughing at you. Your breeches haven't been properly dry in 2 days. Your socks squish slightly when you step. And that green-grey fuzz on your sash. It wasn't there yesterday. This is not an inconvenience. This is war. You remember the first time mold claimed your clothes. It was back when you still thought you had a handle on shipboard life. Before you understood the climate didn't care about your systems. You folded your shirt, stashed it neatly in a box under your hammock, and left it there for a week. You came back. It was ... fuzzy, not dusty. Fuzzy. It had a coat, like a feral cat or something grown in a damp pantry. You picked it up, screamed internally, and tried to scrape it off with a spoon. It didn't work. You soaked it in vinegar, dried it in the sun, even tried beating it against the mast like it owed you money. Nothing helped. The smell stayed. Not like rot, not like sweat. Mold has its own personality, earthy, sour, ancient. Like a ghost that's been in your laundry bag for a century. Historians still argue whether pirates suffered more from mold than other sailors. But anyone who's lived in the Caribbean for more than a week knows how this ends. The damp doesn't leave. It lingers. It waits. It finds the warmest, darkest corners of your life and makes them smell like dead leaves and clothes. Clothes are perfect, especially pirate clothes, which are rarely washed with real soap, almost never dried properly, and constantly exposed to salt, grime, and whatever that was you sat on last Tuesday. Mold loves that. It thrives in it, and it doesn't discriminate. Your best shirt, your last pair of breeches, your one halfway clean scarf, nothing is safe. You look around the deck and see the evidence. That guy over there. His boots have gone soft around the edges. That's not wear, that's mold. That rope that smells funny. Mold. That hammock with the dark patch no one will admit to sleeping in. Mold. And worst of all, no one talks about it. You just deal with it. You scrape, you dry, you sprinkle rum like it's a cleansing spell. One man keeps a pouch of powdered lime he claims wards off mildew. Another uses ash. You tried cloves once. It smelled like a rotten pie. None of it really works. The only solution is sun and time, and time is something you rarely have when it comes to laundry, especially when storms are on the horizon and nothing dries right. You try to hang your shirt up again, looping it over a length of rope strung between the mainmast and a pile of barrels. It drips steadily. You tap it, hoping to encourage evaporation, but it just slaps your knuckles like a damp insult. Somewhere behind you, someone curses about their breeches smelling like cheese. You're not sure if it's a metaphor. It probably isn't. There's a kind of nose blindness that sets in after weeks at sea. You stop noticing your own scent, but mold cuts through that. It announces itself. It's the punchline to every joke about airing things out. It's the reason no one wants to sit near the sails when they're furled. Even the ship smells different. Below deck, the wood swells with moisture. The beams weep. Your hammock grows clammy, and the clothes you wear to sleep, sad, threadbare comforts, start to betray you, so you take action. You dig through. The crew's shared cleaning chest, really just a barrel, filled with semi-questionable supplies, and come up with a jar of thick black paste labeled Nose Be Gone. You assume it's for covering up smells. You apply a thin smear under your nose and instantly regret it. It's mostly fish oil. You spend the next hour with burning nostrils and a renewed hatred for everyone aboard. But at least it distracts you from the mold. Someone suggests burning the worst off items, a small bonfire on deck. The captain shoots that idea down, mostly because last time it happened, half the sail got singed. You settle for sunblasting, instead laying every piece of damp fabric flat on the deck and hoping the heat returns soon. Then comes the rain. Because, of course it does. Just as the breeze returns and the humidity breaks, the sky opens and dumps 3 hours of warm, heavy rain onto everything. Your drying shirt, soaked again. The breeches, they might as well live in a puddle now. Everyone scrambles to save what they can. Shirts are tucked into barrels. Socks are tied to lantern hooks. One guy, in a moment of pure desperation, wears everything he owns and stands on the foredeck like a dripping scarecrow, hoping body heat can finish the job. You retreat below, wet, tired, mildly moldy, and deeply annoyed, and yet you laugh. Because what else is there? You're part of this soggy brotherhood now. You've fought mildew with vinegar. You've slept next to pants that could walk on their own. You've burned breeches in a moment of spite and regretted it an hour later, when the temperature dropped. Mold wins sometimes, often, but you keep trying. You keep scraping, washing, drying, hoping. Because even in this endless humidity, in the heat and the stink and the rot, you still care. Not just about the clothes, but about the idea of being someone who doesn't completely give in, who still hangs a shirt to dry even when he knows it'll rain, who still tries. The night is thick again, the mold back in full force. But your hammock is dry enough, your shirt hangs near your head, and you've learned something vital. The Caribbean will always try to rot your clothes, but as long as you keep washing, keep hanging, keep hoping for sun, you haven't lost. Not completely. You're hunched over the side of the ship again, breezes flapping your slightly less moldy shirt against your ribs, staring at a brown-red smear on your sleeve like it's a cryptic message from the gods. It wasn't there this morning. That much you know, and now, here it is, soaked in, dried hard, crackled slightly at the edges, like the world's saddest pirate insignia. You sniff it, regret it instantly. Is it blood? Possibly. Rum? Equally plausible. Salt fish residue? Don't. Rule it out. The longer you stare, the less confident you feel. Because that's the other thing about pirate laundry half the time. You don't even know what's on you. Clothes out here are like diaries you forgot you were writing. Every stain, every splash, every discolored patch is a memory, a riddle, or both. Welcome to the daily psychological thriller of tropical stains and unsolved mysteries. You try rubbing it out with seawater. Nothing. It just smears into a larger, angrier shape. You scrape it with a nail. No good. The fabric's holding onto that blotch like it's personal. And maybe it is. Maybe your clothes have decided to catalogue your crimes better than your memory. You look around. Everyone else is doing their own forensic investigations. One guy's bleaching a sash with citrus peel and swearing it used to be blue. Another's holding up a pair of breeches against the sun like he's searching for a map. You're not alone in this. Historians still argue whether pirates gave much thought to fabric stains, but from where you're standing, the answer is absolutely. Not because they were vain, not because they were neat freaks, but because in a world where you wear the same outfit every day until it falls apart, stains become something like status symbols, or at least identifiers. You know the difference between a new recruit and an old salt by the stories their shirts tell. A fresh, bright smear across the chest, likely recent action. A blackened patch at the collar, powder burn. Grey-green blotches around the hem, bilge, exposure. And then there are the truly inexplicable ones. One guy, you know everyone calls him Pickles, has a pair of breeches with a neon orange streak across the rear. No one knows why. He won't say, and so, of course, the legend grows. Theories range from fermented fruit mishaps to cursed cargo. Holds to a brief and terrifying encounter with an alchemist's apprentice in Havana. Whatever the truth is, he wears those breeches like a badge. You inspect the stain again. It hasn't spread. That's good. It hasn't moved. Also good. But it hasn't faded either. You reach for your emergency cleaning blend, a pouch of sand, ash, and something vaguely minty. You rub it in like a dry scrub, muttering encouragements to the fabric like a man coaxing a mule through a swamp. It does ... something. The stain looks blurrier now, less intense. That counts as progress. Pirate cleaning isn't about perfection. It's about mitigation. You're not trying to look new. You're just trying to smell slightly less like death. And convince others that you haven't been sleeping inside a dead whale. And here's the thing, sometimes the stains lie. That brown mark might look like blood, but could easily be overripe plantain pulp. That black smear could be tar or pitch, or that weird sauce from that floating soup pot incident you try not to think about. Pirates didn't carry detergent. They didn't label things. You spilled something, it stuck, and it became part of the tapestry. One crewmate swore his shirt had a coffee stain. You reminded him that no one's seen coffee in months. He looked disturbed for a full hour. You hang your shirt out again, hoping the wind will do what soap cannot. Around you, the deck is taken, on the vibe of a crime scene cleanup. Everyone's doing something to their clothes. One man is boiling his breeches in a kettle, stirring with a stick and muttering about purification. Another is scraping his socks with a blade like he's performing surgery. A third has just accepted defeat and tied a stained scarf around his head like it was meant to be decorative all along. That's the pirate response to mystery stains. Repurpose and reframe. If you can't remove it, you own it. That's not blood. That's passion. That's not rot. that's texture. And if it smells a little off, well, that's your new brand now. Congratulations, of course. Some stains do come with stories. You remember the red blotch across your old shirts? Back the result of a barrel lid coming loose mid-fight and smashing a bottle of red dye. You looked like you'd been stabbed. People gave you space. You didn't correct them. There's power in implication. Same with the tar drip on your left sleeve, still sticky to this day. You claim it was sabotage. It was actually from a failed hammock repair and a misjudged torch. But no one needs to know that. There's pride in survival, even when it's ugly. Pirates wore their shirts like stories. You could track a man's entire career through his laundry. The faded blue meant he'd once served with a navy. The lace at the collar torn now suggested a noble origin, or at least a successful raid. A burn mark on the sleeve meant he'd lit a fuse a little too late. A tear under the armpit, probably from climbing, or fighting, or hugging someone too violently after a card game. Clothes weren't just practical, they were archives. And each stain, as gross or confusing as it might be, added to the legend. Still, you keep trying. You scrub, you rinse, you wring and hope. Not because you think you'll get your shirt back to spotless. That's impossible. But because the effort means something. It means you still care. It means you're still trying to hold onto that last little piece of civility, of humanity, of not being just another crusty soul adrift in a sea of hopeless filth. And maybe, just maybe, you'll figure out what this particular brown smear is before someone asks. You find it by accident, half of a shirt sleeve, curled stiff like an old banana peel, wedged behind a barrel of salted pork. You recognize the color, or what's left of it, a faded blue that once wrapped the arm of a crewmate named Callahan, who hasn't been seen since the last skirmish near the Keys. For a moment, you just stare at it. It's not the first time you've found clothing left behind. Out here, death doesn't come with fanfare. There's no ceremony, no coffin, not even a blanket to drape over the body. Sometimes a man dies, and all that remains are the breeches he tied up to dry and never wore again. Sometimes his shirt becomes a rag, a bandage, or an oilcloth. Sometimes his hat gets passed to the next man in line without so much as a nod. This is pirate life and pirate deathwear. The afterlife of clothing is as chaotic as the men who wore it. You fish the sleeve out, hold it up. The seam is torn. There's a crusted brown mark near the cuff that could be blood or gravy. Maybe both. You shake it. Nothing falls out, but the musty, earthy smell hits your nose instantly. It's decay, yes, but also time. Time spent on a body. Time spent in heat and salt and fear. Historians still argue whether pirates had any specific rites for the dead. Some say burials at sea were formal, with spoken words and flag-shrouded. Send-offs others claim death was so frequent and so inconvenient that bodies were dumped overboard with barely a grunt. But the clothes stuck around. Fabric had value. A man's shirt, if salvageable, got washed, sometimes and reused. His breeches were cut down, patched, traded. Even his boots, if he was lucky enough to own two, got claimed before the fish had a chance. There's something intimate about the clothing left behind. It's like touching a ghost. You remember when Red Sam died, slipped from the rigging in a storm, fell 40 feet and landed wrong. His body was gone within an hour, swallowed by the sea, but his scarf hung on the mast for days. No one took it, not right away. It fluttered there, a sad, limp reminder. Eventually, Someone needed cloth for a sail repair and cut it down. The scarf became rope padding. By then, it no longer belonged to Sam. It belonged to the ship. You look at Callahan's sleeve again. Consider what to do with it. You could throw it overboard, offer a muttered farewell. But something in you hesitates. It's still good cloth. Not much of it, but enough. You take it to your berth, wash it with some of the water you've been saving. Not much, just enough to scrub the crust off. It softens in your hands. Maybe you'll stitch it into your own shirt, near the elbow where yours is thinning. Maybe it'll hold, maybe it won't. But the act feels right. Out here, nothing's wasted. Not food, not breath, not fabric. That's the unspoken rule among pirates. Your clothes live longer than you do. Shirts get repurposed. Sashes become tourniquets. A pair of breeches, once too small for one man, might be hacked into a hat by another. There's a pair of boots currently in circulation that has had at least 5 owners. They squeak when wet, and smell like despair, but they're still boots. The current wearer, a wiry lad with a twitch, claims they whisper to him at night. No one questions it. He's faster than most. Even under the grime, clothing retains a kind of personality. You can tell when you're wearing someone else's shirt. It fits wrong, clings differently, carries smells and memories that don't belong to you. Some men lean into it. They wear their fallen comrade's coat like armor, convinced it gives them luck. Others strip every sign of the previous owner. A way patch over the initials, bleach out the color, remove the buttons, make it theirs. You're somewhere in between. You don't mind the ghosts, as long as they don't itch. Of course, some clothing doesn't make it back into circulation. Some garments are too torn, too bloodied, too heavy with memory. These get burned, usually at night, usually without words. You've stood near such fires, watched shirts curl and blacken, watched breeches vanish into ash. It's not romantic, it's necessary. Fire cleans, fire erases, fire gives you space to forget, even if just for a while. One time, after a particularly grim raid, the quartermaster ordered every item of clothing from the fallen to be burned. No questions, no trades. The smell hung in the sails for days, smoke, sweat, and grief. There's also the issue of superstition. Some pirates believe wearing a dead man's clothes curses you. Others believe it protects you. One old sailor swore that the only reason he'd survived 6 mutinies and 2 storms was because he wore the breeches of a man who'd died screaming. He absorbed all the bad luck. He said, "I'm just riding the leftovers." You didn't argue. You just made a note not to sit near him during lightning strikes. But most of the time, there's no ceremony. You come across a pair of boots. You check the soles. You check the size. You slip them on. If they fit, they're yours. If not, you trade. You patch. You scavenge. Life goes on, and so does the wardrobe. And every now and then, you find a piece that sticks. A vest with good pockets. A scarf that never mildews. A belt that doesn't chafe. These become precious. You mend them obsessively. You sleep with them under your hammock. You watch the sky for signs that someone might try to steal them. Because if you die tomorrow, these are the things someone else will find. And maybe, just maybe, they'll keep them going. You lie back in your hammock now, the piece of Callahan's sleeve folded beside your head. You'll stitch it tomorrow, or the next day. Or maybe you won't. Maybe it'll just sit there, a small, soft reminder that no one's clothing really disappears. It just changes hands, changes shape, becomes something else. Out here, that's the best any of you can hope for. To leave something behind that keeps another pirate warm for one more night. The rain has stopped, for now. You're barefoot on the upper deck, where the wood squelches slightly beneath each step, swollen with water and secrets. The wind's lighter, but there's still enough of it to make the rigging sing softly. Wet, wary lullaby. You're not on duty, not technically. So you spend your stolen hour weaving between barrels, ropes, and laundry lines, which right now look more like prayer flags than practical drying spaces. Shirts flutter like they're begging for mercy. Breeches drip steadily, forming puddles that smell like foot rot and citrus. And then you see it. A man and a woman, clearly not part of the regular crew, standing too close beneath a hanging tarp, whispering over what appears to be a very damp scarf. The sight makes you pause. It's the kind of moment that makes the world briefly feel like something other than wood, salt, and violence. Pirate romance isn't common, but when it appears, it's always tangled in the most inconvenient places. A wet laundry line and a dirty breach. Turns out, the woman's from the last raid, a stowaway or captive or runaway. You're not sure which, and it's not your business unless someone loses a finger. She's been aboard 2 weeks, silent, mostly, except when she argued over how her clothes were being washed. And now, here she is, staring up at a man who hasn't spoken a full sentence in 3 days, but is suddenly explaining how to tie a sash around the waist so it won't chafe while climbing. You roll your eyes, but you also don't walk away, because the truth is, Lavore, at least it's sleep-deprived. Salt-cured cousins, sometimes blooms in the worst conditions. And more often than not, it involves laundry. Clothes tell stories. That's something you've known for a while now. But when it comes to pirate affection, they become more than that. They become gestures. A clean shirt offered without asking is practically a proposal. Sharing your only dry scarf during a squall, that's devotion. You've seen men fight over a sash and then tie it together as a kind of shared truce. You've seen one pirate carry a woman's freshly washed skirt like it was made of silk spun by sirens. It wasn't. It was patchwork linen that smelled vaguely of crab. But it meant something. Historians rarely talk about this side of pirate life. They focus on the blood, the gold, the gunpowder. But you've lived in the quiet corners between cannon blasts. And you know sometimes, when the stink is manageable and the sky's not falling, do people find a kind of fragile comfort in each other? It never lasts, of course. Not because it isn't real, but because the sea doesn't let anything stay too clean for long. Still, for a day, maybe a week, you'll see shared tasks emerge. Someone washing a partner's breeches with extra care, folding a shirt instead of wadding it into a ball, patching a sleeve with thread that matches instead of the usual mismatched. Chaos. These are the soft rebellions of pirate romance. You once shared your hammock with a woman who mended your coat with thread from her corset. She never said why. She just handed it back one morning, quiet and warm, and walked off before you could mumble something dumb in return. That coat lasted another year. Outlived her, in fact. You still have a strip of that thread tucked into the lining, even now. She's gone, but her stitch tight, neat, a little crooked at the end remains. That's what passes for love out here. Not vows, not poems, but repairs. You keep watching the pair under the tarp. He's now showing her how to wring water out of a sock without twisting the seam. She's nodding like he's revealing ancient magic. Maybe he is. You wonder how long it'll last. Maybe until the next port. Maybe until someone says the wrong thing. Or maybe until one of them loses a shirt in a bet and forgets who they promised it to. Pirates aren't built for forever, but they're damn good at the right now. There's also jealousy, of course, possession disguised as affection. You've seen men gift a shirt only to snatch it back mid-argument. You've seen a scarf thrown into the sea during a spat, followed by a 2-hour screaming match over which one of them had claimed it. Clothing isn't just fabric, it's emotional real estate. When it's yours, it's identity. When it's shared, it's a bond. When it's taken, it's war. One fringe tradition you've heard whispered about, a kind of sea folk mythos. The laundry vow, supposedly, to pirates in love, would each wash the other's clothing and swap one piece to wear for a day. If both pieces came back intact and unsoiled, it was considered a good omen. If either got ruined, well, back to drinking alone. No one's really sure if it was real or just a product of bored sailors trying to make drama poetic. But still, you've seen versions of it. That quiet moment when a man hands over his scarf like it's a ring. The night when a woman returned a patch-reinforced shirt with a smile that said, "I saved this for you." You don't mock it. Not anymore. Not after you've seen what this life takes from people, and how hard they fight to hold onto scraps of connection. Even tonight, as the clouds break and the moon fights its way through, you catch the faint silhouette of a shirt tied to a rope just outside the helm. It's not drying. It's decorative. Probably hers. Maybe his. Hung like a flag of intent. With something, for now. You turn away, give them space, and head toward your own bundle. It's not much, just a shirt with fewer holes and breeches that don't itch in the worst places, but it's yours. You tug the shirt over your head, breathing in a faint scent of salt and citrus. It smells like a memory you don't mind keeping, and tomorrow, who knows? Maybe you'll share your vinegar stash with someone. Maybe not. But if you do, it won't be just for the cleaning. It'll be for the moment. The small, ridiculous tenderness of offering someone your last scrap of fabric that isn't stained, torn, or claimed by mildew. Because out here, in the floating purgatory between ports and storms, laundry isn't just survival, it's how you say you care without saying anything at all. You wake before dawn this time, not from shouting or storm warnings, but from the soft, rhythmic slap of shirts against wood. The deck creaks faintly beneath your feet as you step into the dim grey light, the smell of salt thick in your nostrils. And there it is, the laundry line, alive again. It stretches between two masts like a makeshift spine holding the ship together. Shirts hang limp, breeches twisted at the ankles, a scarf knotted neatly at the end like someone left a signature. You've done it all, seen it all, scrubbing with ash, bleaching with citrus, beating breeches until they surrendered or split at the seams. You've boiled shirts in buckets of brine, dried socks over cannon barrels, patched underthings with strips of sail and dreams. You've fought over laundry, made peace with it, stitched pieces of dead men into your own sleeves, and learned to spot the beginnings of mildew the way some folks read omens in tea leaves. And through it all, you've realized something, pirate. Laundry wasn't a side task, it was the whole story. It was identity, economy, ritual, and rebellion wrapped in cotton, linen, wool, and whatever else you could steal and wrap around your increasingly salt-ravaged body. It marked your rank, revealed your sins, declared your loyalties, and betrayed your weaknesses. It also made you feel, if just for a minute, like a person who could still choose to care. That might be the biggest miracle of all, because out here the sea strips you of everything: names, pasts, intentions, They all wash away in salt and sweat. But your shirt, that patchy, fraying, half-clean shirt, that's yours. You made that decision to clean it. You hung it up to dry when the rain cleared and the sky turned pink. You claimed that inch of dignity, and no one took it from you. Not the captain, not the wind. Not even that one rat with a scarf who keeps eyeing your socks. Historians still argue whether laundry practices on pirate ships were a sign of structure or simply desperate improvisation. Whether the act of washing was about hygiene or the illusion of control. But when you've lived it, when you've had to make the decision between rationing water for soup or for rinsing the only breeches you own, you understand that laundry was never just about the clothes. It was about respect, about holding on to something, even if it was just a damp, threadbare rag that smelled slightly less like despair than it did the day before. That's not nothing. That's everything. You tie your own shirt to the line. Now, careful with the knots, like you're stringing up a flag. The fabric is worn thin, nearly translucent at the elbows, but it's clean. Or, let's say, cleaner. It sways gently in the wind, catching the first kiss of sun. Around you, others begin to stir. You hear the cough of a man who's been sleeping too close to the bilge. The soft hiss of someone boiling water over a contained flame. The unmistakable grumble of a man who just realized his socks are still wet and may never dry again. This is the real pirate symphony. Not gunshots, not gold coins clinking, but the whisper of sails, the creak of hammocks, and the rustle of semi-clean shirts catching the breeze. Someone passes you, nods once, and hangs a pair of breeches beside your shirt. No words, no need. The message is clear. We're trying. That's what pirate laundry is, in the end, silent act of resistance. Against decay, against chaos, against the creeping certainty that the sea wants you erased. You're saying, not yet, not today. You're saying, I matter, even if my scarf is stolen and my socks smell like betrayal. And honestly, that's beautiful. You take a moment to appreciate the line, each item, a story, a statement. The red sash stained with what might be wine or blood. The patchwork breeches that have seen more ports than half the crew. The scarf tied at the end, fluttering like a defiant tail. And somewhere on the deck, probably half buried under a coil of rope, a shirt waits for its chance to dry. Its chance to mean something again. Maybe you'll find it. Maybe you'll mend it. Maybe you'll wear it tomorrow and remember the man it used to belong to. And so we return to the beginning. To you, standing barefoot on planks that have soaked up centuries of sweat and salt, staring at a piece of cloth fluttering against the sky. You've survived storms, mutinies, heartbreak, and an alarming number of stains of questionable origin. You've washed your shirt in vinegar, in rainwater, in sheer willpower. You've guarded your breeches like treasure. You've watched clothes outlive their owners, turn into flags, bandages, rags, and finally memories. And now, here you are, still hanging your shirt like it matters. Because it does, and maybe. When this voyage ends, when the anchor drops and you walk barefoot through some sleepy port town, you'll carry that shirt with you. You'll smell it, still faintly tinged with smoke and sweat and salt, and remember what it took to keep it clean, or cleanish. And maybe, just maybe, you'll keep that memory like you kept the shirt, patchy, weathered, imperfect, and utterly yours. The ship rocks softer now, lulled by the evening tide. The sails above you droop with contented exhaustion, and the sea hums with that low, timeless whisper, Only those who've lived afloat truly hear. You stretch once, slowly, arms heavy and loose. The last shirt on the line flutters, then rests. Even the wind needs to sleep. The air is warm, not sticky, and the smell of you breathe slow enough, fold nose fades into something sweet, faint. Traces of citrus, wood smoke, and salt linger like an old friend who overstays their welcome but knows how to stay quiet. You've made it through the stink, the stains, the mutinies and mildew. You know now what it means to carry your story stitched into fabric and washed in desperation. You know the small victories: a shirt not soaked, a sock not stolen, a breeze that dries instead of ruins. You've seen love whispered through laundry lines and memories pressed into seams. And maybe, in some quiet part of your mind, you've come to understand that surviving out here isn't always about the blade or the loot. Sometimes it's about knowing how to fold a shirt just right so it doesn't mildew before morning. So let that shirt dry. Let your shoulders ease. Let the sound of the sea carry you, now steady, rocking, soothing. Let it tell you that you've done enough today. That your clothes may be worn, but you are still whole. And in this strange, floating world of stink, and salt and silent care, that's more than enough. End of script. Sweet dreams.